Chryso friends, welcome back to Opus Elenae, where we are making way more late period garb than expected. Yes, that's right, I am back with yet another Elizabethan article of clothing. I've been making scattered pieces of garb here and there for Project Get Partner Back into Late Period Clothing, TM, and his recent decision to take up rapier fighting means that said project is getting kicked into high gear. For those of you not familiar with the conventions of SCA rapier fighting, armor is required, but it's quite different from chivalric fighting. Basically, it needs to be enough layers to resist accidental puncture. They have a special test to make sure it passes and everything. Ultimately, this garment has to fulfill two functions. First, it has to be armor, which means it needs to pass the punch test, cover everything required, and be sturdy enough to stand up to repeated vigorous use and laundering. And second, until we get more everyday Elizabethan into his wardrobe, it has to be comfortable and attractive enough to wear his clothing off the field, as well as armor on it. So everyone go grab your cuppa. Today I am drinking Night Circus by Old Growth Alchemy based on the book of the same name and blended in collaboration with the author. It's a black tea with notes of apple and caramel and malty popcorn, and it is just as dreamy and delicious as the book. Let's get into it.
So this is the 2005 pattern. This is the original.
Okay.
Front and back. Two different shoulder wings.
Okay.
I made up a couple different collars.
Okay. Sleeve upper
Sleeve
and lower.
upper and sleeve lower. And then new pattern for the body was made in 2013.
Okay.
So
yeah.
this is...
I feel like you're about due for a new.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get a couple measurements on you just so that I can do some rough changes.
Anything else I can do?
Not right now.
Okay.
I love you, get out.
Okay.
After I've noted partner's new measurements, I will trace the existing pattern pieces onto grid paper and then adjust those pieces to match, making sure I've added 1 to 2 inches of ease in the pattern for the shirt that will go underneath. I'll pin the grid paper pattern together with tabs in a half mock-up to check and see if it's a decent starting point. Because this paper doesn't behave like fabric, it's only a very rough approximation, but it's enough to let me know that I can move on to the fabric muslin. I'm using an old sheet as mock-up fabric, and I'm not being precious about cutting things neatly. I only need to make sure that the tracing and sewing is as accurate as it can be. Because I know I'll be seam ripping this apart later, I'll base the mock-up together with a long straight stitch with a tailor's tack at both ends. To fit the muslin, I'll have partner put it on over his t-shirt and pin it closed at the center front. Then I can pinch out any excess fabric along the seam lines, keeping my modifications as symmetrical as possible. Once I'm happy with the fit, I'll trace over my alteration lines on both sides of the seam before taking it all apart.
To get my new pattern pieces, I will trace the alteration lines from both sides of the body onto the pattern piece in one color. Then with a different color, I will draw a line that averages the two. This works because partner has a relatively symmetrical body. For someone dealing with scoliosis or other symmetrical differences, I would keep each alteration line different and mark which side of the body they went on. After I've drawn and cut my final pattern pieces, I can start cutting fabric. I know that 3 layers of medium weight linen will pass the punch test for rapier armor, so I'll be cutting a fashion fabric layer, an interlining layer, and finally a lining layer. The fashion fabric is this delightful seafoam green color that partner was immensely skeptical of, but eventually it grew on him. The lining fabric for the body of the doublet is a natural linen that I happen to have just enough left over from another project. And for the interlining, I'm using a bold coral color that would look good on approximately nobody and has been lingering in the stash, slated to be overdyed for years. Instead of messing around with all that, I'm just making it the middle of a rapier doublet sandwich. Oh, and the sleeves get a satin lining to make putting the doublet on over a shirt easier. I'm tracing those pieces with a gel pen instead of chalk since that comes off too easily. You may notice that the lower sleeve has an odd shape to it instead of just being a smooth concave curve. There's an incorporated gusset in the armpit in order to increase the available range of movement. For the pieces of the doublet that would benefit from some additional structure, specifically the collar, shoulder wings, and peplum, I'm cutting an interlining from canvas instead of the coral linen. Sorry about the out of focus footage, I'm cutting on the tracing line with no seam allowance because I don't want to add bulk to the seams. And how will the interlining stay in place, you might ask? The same way I'll add additional stiffness and structure, pad stitching. Pad stitching is a tailoring technique that uses rows of tiny stitches to join two fabrics together. By curving the layers as you stitch, it introduces structural tension, making the final product stiffer than either of the two fabrics alone would be. After I'm done with that, I'll sew the pad-stitched fashion layer and lining layer together as normal, using the edge of the canvas as a stitching guide. Next, I'll pin and then baste the fashion and interlining layers together for the rest of the doublet. These will be treated as one layer for the rest of the construction process. Now construction really starts. I'll sew the doublet body pieces, both fashion and lining, together at the shoulder and back side seams. Next, I'll sew the fashion and lining fabrics together at the front edges. Then I can turn the body right side out and press the front openings nice and flat. Then I'll sew each sleeve together, fashion and lining. The satin frays something awful, so those seams will get serged. The fashion layer seams will be graded to reduce bulk and then pressed. Next, I'll sew the sleeve shell and lining together at the wrists with right sides together, and then I'll turn the sleeves right side out and press the wrist seams flat with the lining pulled slightly to the inside so it doesn't show when being worn. Thank you to all of my current and continuing Ko-fi members. As always, your support and the support of all of my members and croissants makes it easier to do what I do and to provide quality content for everyone. Thank you all so much. Stick around after this brief commercial break to see the rest of the doublet. Time to put the sleeves and body together. Since there's a lot going on in the arm side, I'm going to do it in stages. First, I'll insert the shoulder wings, making sure to sew just to the inside of the seam line so that stitching doesn't show when I add the sleeves. Next, I'll insert the actual sleeves, easing the sleeve cap at the top of the arm side. If that's something you struggle with, adding a gathering stitch to the seam allowance on the sleeve cap can help distribute that ease more evenly. It's really important to grade the seam allowances in the arm side since there are a lot of layers of fabric. I like to finish my sleeves by pressing the seam allowances outward against the body fabric. I grade those allowances to be longest so they cover everything else, and then tacking them down with a herringbone stitch. Tight curves at the bottom of the arm side should be clipped so they can lay flat. Next up, I'll attach the collar and peplum to the doublet. Since the lining is only attached at the front seams, it's relatively easy to keep it out of the way while I do that. I do take the time to make sure that all of the seams and edges line up nicely. Then I can fold the lining seam allowances under at the peplum, collar, and arm sides and sew them down to the body of the doublet with a whip stitch. I'm using my machine to make the buttonholes both for speed and durability. Then I'll cut the buttonholes open. Then I'll realize I put the buttonholes on the wrong side because of the continued arbitrary gendering of clothing in a modern world where nobody has servants, which is stupid. Then I'll carry on because it's too late now, and partner will just have to deal with wearing a girl's doublet, which is fine. It's all fine. After I've marked the button placement on partner, a process which I didn't film because I was tired and cranky, see above regarding buttonholes, I can sew on the buttons, which were the inspiration for the whole color scheme. You can get them at Bad Baroness Buttons, link in the description, of course. And now it's time to decorate. I consulted with partner on trim placement, and once we agreed on that, I used quilting thread to base the trim in place. I like to use bias tape for trim on doublets because it eases around curved seams so well. The last step is to permanently attach the trim with a pick stitch, which is a modified backstitch where only a tiny bit of thread shows on the surface. I like to use a contrasting color for added visual interest, in this case, a light warm brown that echoes the copper of the verdigris buttons.
Thanks for coming along with me today. To say that I'm pleased with the results would be a massive understatement. There's something so satisfying about successfully altering an old pattern, getting good fit results, working up a design concept, and blending everything together into a project that fulfills your vision. And partner is happy with it too, which is really what matters. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe and click the bell if you want. You can find me on social media. I am at Opus Elenae everywhere, but the place you can find me most reliably is my Discord. If you're interested in sewing, history, or just a wonderfully supportive community, come and join us at the link in the description. Until next time, be kind, do the work, continue supporting marginalized people, and keep creating. Foil.